This week's parsha is, we have two parshas, Acharei Ma'asim Kedoshim. The first one, Acharei, or Acharei Mos, literally means after the death or after the passing. And it opens up talking about Acharei Mos Shnei Bnei Aaron, B'karvasam Lifnei Hashem B'yom Osor. And it was after the passing of the two sons of Aaron, when they came close before Hashem and they passed away. Let's put this on the board. So it says, Acharei Mos Shnei Bnei Aharon Bekar Vasam Lifnei Hashem B'yom Osor. After the passing of Aaron's two sons, because when they came close before Hashem, and they passed away. So the story here is that two of Aaron's sons, Nadav and Avihu, were very inspired. We have the Mishkan, the tabernacle, and they got very inspired in their pursuit of divinity, their pursuit of spirituality. They wanted to really connect to Hashem, to the Creator. And so they brought incense being in some ways, let's say, the highest of all offerings. And it was a mitzvah and an obligation, part of the service, to bring incense in the Mishkan, in the Beis HaMikdash. But it wasn't something you would just show up and do because you felt like it. And that's what they did. They decided, they came and they brought incense, an incense offering, uninvited, uninstructed. And when they brought this incense, they passed away, basically. Their souls left their bodies. So at first glance, well, let's start with the question. Right? There's a very, very clear redundancy here in the pasuk, in the verse. It says, after the passing of the two sons of Aaron, when they came close before Hashem and they passed away. We say passing away twice. We could either say after the passing of the two sons of Aaron when they came close before Hashem and they offered this incense. Or say, and it was after the two sons of Aaron came close before Hashem and passed away. Why does it say after the passing of the two sons of Aaron when they came close before Hashem and they passed away? It's saying the same thing twice. And the Torah doesn't ever say anything unnecessarily. The Torah doesn't use a letter unnecessarily, certainly not a word. And it wouldn't say something just repeating itself for no reason. So the question is, why does it mention the passing twice? Obviously, there's a specific reason. There's something it's coming to teach us, and it is coming to teach us something very, very, very important. And important, not just important, but fundamental to really every part of our lives. All day, every day, pretty much. So at face value, at a glance, in the pshat interpretation, the simple level face value understanding or meaning of the verses or of this story is that they did something wrong. They brought incense, an offering that they weren't supposed to, and they were punished. And the punishment was that they passed away. There's a deeper understanding here, a deeper layer of meaning, which views this not so much as a transgression and a punishment, not just because, let's all just make everything be nice and pretend that nothing bad ever happened, but because the Torah itself refers to these two sons of Aaron as being close to Hashem, as being special people who had a unique commitment and devotion, etc. So there's going to be a deeper layer here to this story. And there is. And that is that what happened here wasn't transgression and punishment in a punitive sense. It was action and natural outcome or consequence of that action. So Nadav and Avihu were very, very inspired about spirituality, about divinity. And they wanted to come close to Hashem. They wanted to come close to divinity, and they got so inspired about divinity, about godliness, about spirituality. They weren't really interested in remaining in their bodies in this world as living human beings in a physical experience. They weren't interested. They just wanted spirituality. And so they went with that, went all the way, did the highest of spiritual offerings in the Mishkan, and their souls got so caught up in this pursuit of divinity that they just continued on upwards and left their bodies, and they passed away. And so here already we have an answer for this question, and that is, why does it mention passing twice? There's a comma here, and this whole thing here is one phrase. It's not Bakarvasam lifnei Hashem, when they came close before Hashem, comma, v'yamusu, and they passed away. That's not the correct way to read it. The way to read it is Achrei Moshe b'nei Aaron, after the passing of the two sons of Aaron, Bakarvasam lifnei Hashem v'yamusu, when they came close before Hashem and passed away. It was one thing. Coming close to Hashem and passing away is one phrase, because that's what happened. The passing was the outcome and the continuation of them coming close before Hashem. There's a physical body which is made out of physical matter. There is a soul, which is a non-physical entity, which partners with the body, which becomes a composite, which forms a composite entity together with the body. Human body plus human soul equals human being. But they weren't interested in remaining stuck in a body as a composite entity with this physical body, with the limitations. Right? The soul, in terms of its ability to feel and consciously experience divinity and godliness, is very limited, let's say, during the duration of its stay in the body, because it becomes a composite entity with the body, and a physical body doesn't sense the non-physical. We sense the physical. And that limits the extent to which the soul can, let's say, consciously experience divinity. And there's a Mishnah in Pirkei Avos that says, Al karchach atachai, against your will you live. And then it continues, Al karchach atameis, and against one's will they pass away. How does that make sense? It makes perfect sense. And there are a number of ways of explaining the second half, different layers of depth. But the Mishnah tells us that, first of all, before a person is born, there is a soul, and when that soul is informed, okay, you're up, time to go partner with this body in a human experience, the soul doesn't want to go. The soul is a non-physical entity, a spiritual entity that's basking in the glory of divinity, experiencing the infinite radiance of the Creator, of God, of Hashem. And then it's going to come and now be bonded with a body in this composite entity, and it's going to have this physical experience, and it's mundane, and there's all of this materialism, and It's not interested. It doesn't want to go down there. It wants to stay in the, in this divine, infinite spiritual experience. Once it gets down here, it wants to stay and it doesn't want to leave. That's a separate part of the story. But every single soul that's here didn't want to come down before it came here. It wanted to stay there. And for good reason. And so none of an Avio understanding that and appreciating that and understanding and appreciating that living in a physical body severely impairs one's ability to sense, to feel, to taste, to experience divinity and godliness in an experiential way. They want it out. And so, B'kravasam lifnei Hashem v'yomu, so they came close before Hashem and passed away. It's one statement. They were on this journey in the pursuit of spirituality, and they kept pursuing. And in that pursuit, there comes a point where the soul only could get closer to spirituality by leaving the body, and that's what happened. That was part of their pursuit.
So as part of their pursuit, was there any element of it where they actually physically, tangibly experienced Hashem? Like as they went up and up and up, was there any part of it that they actually could smell Hashem, actually could taste Hashem and see the five senses, or no?
It's a good question. I don't know that I could give you a definitive answer. I think there's probably a lot of gray in there. I would say my guess is probably largely not, in a way that's any different to what anyone else experiences. Which means that there are times and moments when we get moments of inspiration and we feel things that are an outcome of something happening spiritually, the neshama itself sort of getting a taste of godliness. That can happen sometimes, and then it spills over into the conscious experience. But even when that happens, we don't feel consciously, we're not consciously aware of what it is that's happening. And I haven't seen any indication of the fact that it was any different for them.
So everything they had was purely spiritual as they were going up and up and up.
Can you clarify what you mean more specifically?
Even a small ounce, they didn't get a small taste of physicality.
After their souls left their bodies? Or while it was still in their body?
Both.
Well, while their souls were in their bodies, there was everything was more or less material, but they wanted to leave that and to just experience spirituality. And so in that pursuit, their souls eventually departed their bodies. Now, at the end of the day, so a few things here to sort of clarify. Number one, what they did was wrong. That's a given. As far as, let's say, mistakes and mess-ups go, there are bigger mistakes and mess-ups than wanting spirituality too badly, too desperately. But it was wrong, and we're going to have to understand why, where they went wrong, and what would be the healthy, correct equivalent of that. So what was wrong? What's wrong with the pursuit of spirituality? We talk all the time about how, we are here to live a life with purpose, and we learn and spend time trying to understand as much as we can about Hashem and about godliness, so that we'll become less materialistic, less focused on the physical, more focused on the spiritual, etc. It sounds like what they did was just exactly right. What wasn't right about what they did? Where did they go wrong, and what was wrong about it?
Goes against the purpose of the creation of the world. The purpose isn't to go back to Hashem, it's to bring Hashem here, into the physical.
Bingo. Exactly. So now, what we need to really figure out and get clear, and then hopefully comfortable with, is how these two things work together. So, there's a midrash that says the reason that they passed away was because, and it says a number of reasons, they went lifnei v'lifnim, they went into the Holy of Holies where they weren't supposed to go. It's only a place that the Kohen Gadol would go on Yom Kippur. They went in mechusrei begodim, without sufficient garments. They weren't dressed correctly the way that a Kohen Gadol is supposed to be dressed, doing that, bringing that offering. And they didn't have families. They didn't have wives. They didn't have children. Halachically, the Kohen Gadol has to be a family man, has to be married with children for the Yom Kippur service. And they didn't have wives and children. All of these things actually, again, the same theme is there if we go a layer deeper. So, going back to what you said, which is where they went wrong, Hashem didn't create the world and send us here, send our souls down here into bodies so that we could just leave and the souls could just depart and get inspired about godliness and just go back up to heaven and the souls just drop dead, which is what they did basically. Hashem created the universe for a reason. Time, space, matter, energy, the universe, everything in it. All of it was created with a purpose, for a reason. And that purpose is so that matter and spirit, physicality, spirituality, godly, divinity should be integrated into each other. That godliness, divinity should be integrated into physical matter. That's the purpose of everything existing. Now, two things are true at the same time. Number one, most people naturally are relatively materially oriented. We are. Right? We're interested in good food. We're interested in things that make us feel good, things that are enjoyable, things that bring us pleasure. And the fact that that's the way we are is a feature, not a bug. There's nothing wrong with the fact that that's the way we are. Hashem designed us that way intentionally. Our life here is an opportunity to become informed, to learn and understand that there's more to the universe than just physical enjoyment and pleasure. There's a purpose. Everything has meaning. And the more we understand about what that purpose is, about what that meaning is, about godliness, about spirituality, and we learn and understand and then internalize it and connect to it and make it real and it becomes a real part of who we are, as we go through that process, we will, over time, become less and less materially oriented, more and more spiritually focused. We become less materialistic. It doesn't mean we should not engage with the material. We shouldn't engage with the physical. Because if we don't engage with the physical world, if we just distance ourselves from the physical world, we can't integrate godliness into the physical world, and then that defeats the whole purpose. At the same time, on the other end of that spectrum, if we are very engaged in the physical world and in the material, and that's our focus, and that's our pursuit, and that's what it's all about the physical, well, we're very involved with the physical, but we're also not integrating godliness into it because it's all about the physical and the material. The godliness isn't really part of the picture. The sweet spot is, where that integration actually happens, is when we interact with the physical world with a sense of purpose and meaning, and we do it in a way that follows the commandments and the guidelines and directives of the Torah that the Creator gave to us. It's effectively a user manual, a guidebook for how to live effectively, correctly, so that you fulfill your purpose. When we interact with the world in a way that is primarily spiritually focused, then we're interacting with the world, we have that spiritual focus and connection and attachment to divinity, so our interactions with the world then become a vehicle for integrating godliness, divinity, into the things that we interact with, into the world that we interact with. That's where it's at. That's the whole point of this all. Now, naturally, most people are starting out way on the material end of the spectrum, way more, materialistic, materially oriented. That's what we relate to. That's what we're interested in. And so the direction of movement and focus, generally, in order for us to reach somewhere in that, let's say, that range of the sweet spot in the middle where we have both, it takes a lot of movement in the direction of becoming more and more and more spiritually focused, spiritually oriented, etc., becoming less materialistic, not interacting with the physical less, but less materialistic in orientation, in interest, in motivation. And so, yes, that is the thing that we primarily focus on. Most people are not in the position that Aaron's sons were in, where the biggest problem is going to be becoming too spiritually oriented and interested in the material too little. Most people are not in the range of having that issue. Most of us are on the other end of the spectrum, and we have to constantly work on becoming more spiritually aware, more spiritually attuned, more spiritually oriented, and as a result, naturally, less materialistic. Most of us do have to spend our whole lives pushing in that direction. They happened to go overboard in that direction. So it's not that there's something wrong with moving in that direction. Most of us have to be, or should ideally be, working very hard to move in that direction our whole lives. They went too far. And this is represented in the four things that the Mishnah says. They went lifnai v'lifnim, all the way deep inside where they weren't supposed to. This means both physically within the Mishkan, and also in terms of their experience, they went too deep into the pursuit of the spiritual, the pursuit of godliness. Mechusrei begodim, they were missing their garments. Garments in the mystical parts of Torah, Kabbalah and Chassidus, garments are a metaphor for mitzvahs. Right? Garments, clothing, are a way that that a person, number one, expresses themselves. They're not really part of the person. They're something that the person wears. You can take them on, put them off, change them. They're completely interchangeable. Just like actions. We could choose to do what we want. We can change our actions. They're not a part of us. They're something that we do. They're a way that we are expressed, just like garments. So they were missing garments. They were short on mitzvahs. They didn't do enough mitzvahs. Why? Because mitzvahs are interactive. They weren't interested in getting out there and doing things. They were less interested in going out and eating food, saying a bracha, putting on tefillin, etc. They were more interested in just meditating and pursuing a spiritual experience. So they were short on garments, short on mitzvahs. They didn't get married. They didn't have children. Why? Having a family takes a lot of time away from everything else, including if someone wants to just spend their entire life experience in the pursuit of spirituality, learning, understanding, meditating, connecting, etc., to go, all the way is a full-time pursuit. Having a family, having a wife, having children, those things take a lot of time. They weren't interested. They didn't get married. They didn't have kids. To be clear, halachically, for a man, this is primarily relevant for a man, because men have a halachic obligation to have a family, to have children. Women don't. A young man who is mature enough and of age to be able to get married is halachically obligated to pursue marriage aggressively, to pursue marriage, to have children, to build a family. And there is only one reason that one is allowed halachically to delay or even permanently just choose not to get married and establish a family. The only reason a man is halachically allowed to do that ever is if he is so desperate to study Torah full time that he doesn't want the distraction of a family. And this is obviously talking about someone who is actually sitting and studying Torah all day, every day, from when they wake up until they go to bed, not someone who's sitting around in front of an open book scrolling on their phone. It's like, go have a family. But someone who's really dedicated and committed, and this really is the pursuit of their heart and soul, they're technically allowed to not get married and have a family because they're so committed to Torah study, and a family is a very big, let's call it, distraction, if that's their one and only priority. Again, two things are true at the same time. It is the only reason one is halachically allowed to delay, postpone, or even permanently just choose not to get married and raise a family. But that doesn't mean it's ideal or the better or most correct choice. It's allowed. There's a story. Okay, so just before we go there. So here, Aaron's sons didn't want to get married. They didn't want to have children. They were short on mitzvahs because they were too busy thinking and meditating and pursuing spirituality. And these are all things that were part of this fundamental error that they made, which is why they came close before Hashem and passed away. So the Midrash tells us these are their transgressions. These are the things they got wrong. Now again, they're not necessarily technically halachically prohibited, but they're wrong in perspective. The thing is that this puts us in a very difficult spot. What this means is that the way that we are ideally supposed to live and the life that we are supposed to be working towards and pursuing and trying to live is one of fundamental existential complexity and conflict. On one hand, we want to be as interested in spirituality and as uninterested in the physical as possible. At the same time, also as involved and integrated in the physical as possible. And we're supposed to be involved and integrated, but to try to be as uninterested in being as involved and integrated as possible. Good luck with that. So we spend time learning and understanding about Hashem and meditating and trying to connect and trying to become as spiritually aware and attuned and oriented as possible. But we have to do it exactly the right amount in exactly the right way with exactly the right balance and make sure we don't overshoot a little and then, God forbid, make a mistake in the direction of the mistake of Aaron's sons. It's like, good luck figuring that out and holding that balance. Now, on one hand, it's true. It's complex and it's not necessarily simple or easy. There are things in life and the truth is that I'm finding myself saying this more and more lately. The greatest truth in most things in life generally lies in the middle of complexity, in the middle. There are things on one side down here that are true and things on one side down here that are true, but the fullest, most complete and true truth is generally in the middle where things are complex and messy. And there isn't always a black and white, easy, comfortable, complete way to explain everything, put it together with a nice bow on top. Sometimes we can make it all make sense, but it doesn't mean it's not going to continue to be complex and messy, because it is. And this is one of those examples. That being said, it's not like, just, jump in the deep end during a storm and hope for the best. There is a lot that we can do here to set ourselves up for success. And there is a hint to this in a story in the Gemara. It's told in a couple of places in Gemara and in Yaakov. It says that there were four Tanoim, four scholars of the Mishnah who, it says, entered into the orchard here being a metaphor for this divine experience. They entered into, let's say, an experience of divinity, spirituality. each of them had very different outcomes. So the first one, it says, Ben Azai, Hitzitz, he looked, he saw, godliness, he saw the infinity of God, and he died on the spot. And then another one says, Ben Zoma, he looked and he lost his mind. And then Acher, who was one of the most capable and extraordinary Torah scholars of all time, he saw this, this image of the infinity of God, of godliness, and he actually completely did a 180 and became a heretic. And then it says, the fourth person, Rabbi Akiva, nichnas b'shalom v'yatza b'shalom. He went in peace and he came out in peace. Something very inconsistent here. It doesn't say anything about how Ben Azai came in, or how Ben Zoma came in, or how Acher came in, Elisha ben Avoya came in. It just says 4 went in. This one, look, this happened. This one, look, this happened. This one, look, this happened. Rabbi Akiva came in peace and went and departed in peace. So he saw what they saw, but he came out in peace. First of all, Ben Azai, the one who looked and passed away, interestingly, had a very similar story to Aaron's 2 sons. He also chose to remain single, to not have a family, to not have children, because he, like them, had this unquenchable thirst for Torah study. He just wanted to study Torah day and night without stopping, without distraction. He wasn't interested in having children who are crying, and he needs to earn money to support them, and he needs to change diapers and do whatever else he has. He wasn't interested. He doesn't have time for that. He just wants to learn Torah. So there are references to him getting married, perhaps getting married and then, soon after getting divorced for this reason. But he definitely intentionally chose not to have a family. And so what follows, it makes sense that he was the one that he got there into this orchard, metaphorically, into this spiritual experience. He saw this image of divinity. And just like Aaron's sons did, his soul said, yeah, that's where it's at. Bye-bye. And it just left. And his body just dropped on the spot. Exact same thing. And then we have the other 2. And in this story, it tells us something about Rabbi Akiva that it doesn't mention by the others, which is how he came in. And that's because this is very important. Rabbi Akiva Yotza b'Shalom, he came out in peace, and it tells us, why did he come out in peace? The reason he came out in peace is because he went in peace. And what this is telling us here is that a relationship can be complex, and there can be conflict. Not necessarily now, at the conflict I'm talking about now is not conflict between 2 partners, 2 people in a relationship, whether it's 2 people, a person, and Hashem, whatever it is. The conflict here is an internal conflict between when if you really, really, really love someone intensely, you are going to want to be as close to them as possible, as much as possible. But if you love someone really, really strongly and intensely, it's also going to be important to you to do what's important for them, to do what they need, what they want. And sometimes those 2 things are in conflict. Sometimes the best thing we can do for someone is be away from them, whether it's because they need some space, whether it's because there's something that we can do for them which requires us being far away. So now we have conflict. The same love is producing 2 different desires in 2 different directions at the same time. A perhaps desperate, intense desire to be close, and a desperate, intense desire to be far away. And they can't both be true at the same time. And basically, in short, what the Gemara tells us about Rabbi Akiva is that he came into this experience in a healthy, mature relationship with Hashem. Right? A young child, a healthy young child who has healthy attachment with their parents, just always wants to be close to their parents. A very, very young, a 1-year-old child, they are supposed to, be attached to their parents at the hip, to want to be held the whole time, to want to be next to them the whole time. That's a sign of healthy attachment. That's the way it's supposed to be. when they're 1 year old, when they're 2 years old. When a child, is getting later into 2, going on 3, what happens? They start to veer away, to become a little bit more independent. And at first they just go and they play right next to their parent, and then they stop and they look back, and maybe they run back for a quick cuddle, and then they go and keep playing. And over time they venture further and further away, and they go for longer and longer breaks. And eventually, a 50-year-old adult is not supposed to need to go back to their parent for hugs and cuddles every 10 minutes. Right? There comes a point when they're supposed to be independent. Now, let's say, there's another aspect to this, which is where the complexity comes in. Right? Because sometimes, this is not to say that adults are not supposed to feel a desire for attachment and to be close to people they love, including their parents. Not at all. That being said, if there is an adult who loves someone else, whether it's a parent, whether it's another adult, anyone, and they just cannot get out of their space, and they're like attached to them and sitting there at their feet the whole time and following them around everywhere they go, and like a 1-year-old is supposed to do, this adult follows this person to the bathroom and they sit outside the door waiting for them to come out. It's like, Houston, we have a problem. This is not healthy. Not because you are not supposed to desire to be close to this person, but because that desire to be close is supposed to, in a healthy adult, be tempered by an understanding of the responsibility aspect of this, which is this person has to have some space. There are things that this person needs from me, and if I care about them, I'm going to want to do the things that they want. Do we need to take a minute for something? Sorry?
You can't play this to anyone.
I mean, I'm saying it on the record. There's nothing here that I'm saying that is not
Yeah.
is not true or that I'm ashamed of.
Somebody else.
Right? Now, on one hand, a healthy adult should not need to follow this person around and be at their hip 24/7. At the same time, a lot of people, and this is much more common in today's society, that people make the opposite mistake and think everybody can be on our own and everybody can be independent and have their own world and their whole own experience, and no one needs anyone and no one needs any attachment and no one needs any connection. It's like, that is absolute rubbish. Hashem designed us to need connection, to need attachment, to need love throughout the duration of our lives. A healthy relationship in an adult means that there is a desire for closeness and an understanding and appreciation for the fact, and a responsibility for the fact, that there also has to be commitment and an interest in what the other party in this relationship wants and needs. Which means that we want to be close, and we should be close to the extent that makes sense. But there's going to be a need for time apart, for doing things for the other person which warrant us not being in their presence, for giving a person some space if that's what they need. Now, that concept in our relationship with Hashem, I don't think really exists, which is that Hashem needs space from us. It's like, you know what, just come back tomorrow, or leave me to my man cave. That's not a Hashem thing. But Hashem does have, what does exist in our relationship with Hashem is the fact that there are things Hashem wants us to do. And if we really love Hashem, a healthy relationship means, number one, we do want to be as close to Hashem as possible. Number two, we care about Hashem, and therefore we care about our responsibility to do what Hashem wants, which is get involved in the world, interact with the world, be involved in a way that is true to Torah, that follows the guidelines and directives of Torah, yes. With a sense of purpose, with a sense of meaning. But be involved. Now, to be involved properly with that sense of purpose and meaning and not lose focus requires a lot of maintenance, a lot of working on our perspective and our attachment with Hashem and our desire for spirituality and godliness. And the bottom line is, almost everybody, if we neglect that, we're going to just become more and more materialistic over time. So we do have to be working constantly on moving in that direction towards being spiritually oriented. and we don't necessarily, in general, right? Rabbi Akiva didn't have, what the Gemara tells us about Rabbi Akiva is, the reason he came back safely is not because he had less of a desire to be close to Hashem than Ben Azai did. Ben Azai loved Hashem even more than Rabbi Akiva. That's why he died, because his soldier said, I want Hashem. Like, no. The Gemara says that's not what this is about. Right? Rabbi Akiva spent his whole life craving an opportunity to die, to sanctify the name of Hashem, to die in honor of Hashem. He craved that his whole life. And he made sure not to go and arrange that for himself, because he knew that what Hashem wants is for him to be here. He was a teacher whose role in the continuity of Torah to the point that we have it today was pivotal. He was a very unique teacher. He had something unique to offer. Hashem needed him here, so he stayed here and did whatever needed to be done. When Rabbi Akiva passed away, Rabbi Akiva was killed in an excruciating, horrific act of torture. And in that moment, as he was being literally, gruesomely tortured to death, he was in a state of ecstasy, because he said his whole life he's been waiting for a chance to die, to sanctify the name of Hashem, and now finally, after waiting his whole life craving for it, he has this opportunity. In extraordinary physical pain. He was in a state of ecstasy. This is not someone who loved Hashem less than anybody else. The difference between Rabbi Akiva and Ben Azai is not, Ben Azai loved Hashem more than Rabbi Akiva did, so Ben Azai was like, whoa, I'm going to Hashem, and Rabbi Akiva was like, yeah, I don't love Hashem quite as much as you, I'm just going to hang out over here. That's not what this was. The Gemara tells us the reason he came back in one piece, healthy and okay, is because he went in peace. He went in peace. He went in with a healthy perspective of his relationship with Hashem, which was that Rabbi Akiva loved Hashem as much as anybody did. He literally craved this death his whole life. But he didn't pursue it because as much as he desperately craved connection and attachment and closeness to Hashem, that same love, a healthy love, means I desire closeness and understand responsibility, which often will necessitate a lack of the closeness that I desire. And that's a healthy relationship. A healthy relationship is, being attached at the hip as an adult is not healthy. Completely lacking a desire for closeness is equally unhealthy in a relationship. It's just the opposite end. It's not a personal relationship, period, if there's no desire for closeness. We should want to be close to the people who are around us, the people who are important to us, to our family, to our friends, etc. But if we have a healthy, peaceful, shalom perspective and understanding of what this connection and relationship is, we will want to be close, and we will seek closeness and pursue closeness as much as possible to the extent that makes sense and is reasonable. And we will also be committed to our responsibility for being distant and being apart as necessary. Rabbi Akiva came in with that perspective. As long as one pursues Hashem with the understanding that Hashem is the one and only entity of absolute inherent value. Everything other than Hashem himself that has value because Hashem makes it have value. We should long to be close to Hashem, to experience godliness, divinity, to feel attachment to Hashem. We should. The more the better. And there is not a limit on how strongly we should want it. The more strongly we can want it, the better. As long as nichnas b'shalom, as long as we are coming into that desire, that longing, that love, in a way that is healthy, that is peaceful, and so that as our longing and desire for spirituality gets stronger and stronger, we don't lose our awareness of the fact that this desire for closeness comes with an equal sense of commitment to our responsibility, which is Hashem wants us to stay here and to channel divinity into the world. Aaron's sons had, in a sense, it's almost like they had this severe anxious attachment. They were adults who were behaving in their relationship with Hashem like a 1-year-old. It was like, more, I don't want to let go, I don't want to let go, don't close the door, I don't want more. And they just couldn't let go, and so they followed all the way up, and their souls just followed all the way up. They left their bodies, and they kept on going. The problem is not that they loved Hashem too much. The more, the better. The problem was that in this love, they didn't have a healthy, balance isn't the right word. I was going to say balance, but the reason I don't like the word balance is because generally balance, I think, sort of, even if not technically, it sort of carries this image of being somewhere in the middle, not too far this way and not too far that way. And for a lot of things, balance being somewhere in the middle is the sweet spot. This is not about balance. This is about having enough of both. So I guess on the seesaw ends up balanced, not because both things are at the center, they're both all the way out there, but as long as we have the right amount on either end, the seesaw remains balanced. So it's not that we don't want to have too strong a longing for Hashem, we don't want to have too strong a connection to the world. It's like, no, we should have as strong as possible a desire and longing to experience godliness, but that should be tempered and counterbalanced with, on the other side, the feeling of commitment to the God that we love, that we want to be close to, that says that I'm going to go and do what Hashem wants me to do. If I love Hashem, it's important to me to do what He wants. And there's this description, Kabbalistically, this is described, these two directions are described as Ratzu and Shuv. The words come from the prophet, from Yecheskel. He talks about the angels running back and forth. They were running towards Hashem and then running back away, running towards Hashem, running back away. And the reality of this is that hypothetically we could, have both extremes full blast at the same time. Seesaw remains perfectly balanced, hypothetically, but we're human beings, and the reality is we're going to tend to go a little bit to experience and focus and be a little bit more in one direction, and then to go, and course correct and go a little, not even course correct, but then to just go in the other direction. As humans, it's very hard to be doing opposite things at the same time all the time. But if we have that healthy perspective and understanding and foundation, we can work on doing both, and at sometimes we're going to, be focusing a little more in one direction, sometimes focusing a little more in another direction, and then we have to, do the work to get back over here, and then to make sure we don't lose focus and we remember to go back here. And that's this Ratzu v'Shuv, running back and forth, back and forth. But we're only going to maintain this, this sort of oscillation back and forth between connection and attachment and then commitment and distance or separation, if we come into it with a healthy view of the foundation and the fundamentals of this relationship. And that's why the Gemara tells us the reason Rabbi Akiva came out in peace, it's not because he loved Hashem less, it's not because he was impressed any less, it's just because he came in with a healthy perspective, which is, the more I crave closeness to Hashem, because I love Hashem, by definition, if it's a healthy love, that is going to necessitate an equally strong commitment to being distant from Hashem as necessary, when that's what Hashem wants, when that's what Hashem desires. And when we have that healthy perspective, there is no too far. As long as we're going equally far in both directions, and as long as that we can have an ever-increasing desire for connection to Hashem and to experience godliness. It's not like there's a point at which that becomes too much. There can be a point where the balance is lost and then it becomes too much, but not because it's too much. As long as it's nichnas b'shalom, we come in with peace, with a healthy perspective, and we have that equal appreciation for our responsibility and commitment to Hashem, the more the better of both. Love Hashem as much as possible. Have a craving. Rabbi Akiva literally craved his whole life to die for Hashem. But he didn't do it. That's the difference between Rabbi Akiva and Ben Azai, between Rabbi Akiva and Aaron's sons. He didn't love Hashem any less. It's absurd to think that. The way that he died and that he was in a state of ecstasy for the fact that he finally got to fulfill his greatest longing of his whole life, there's no way that you can suggest that he loved Hashem any less than anybody. It's just this was a healthy love as opposed to a unhealthy, unbalanced love. And this is the lesson from Aaron's sons. Yes, pursue connection to divinity. And before that is work to become more spiritually oriented and interested and attuned so that you'll become less materialistic. As much as possible, as long as you're coming into it with a healthy perspective so that you never lose the balance. And as that desire for connection and experience with godliness and to experience godliness increases, it's counterbalanced with an increasing sense of responsibility to do what we're here for.